Okay, well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Martha Heller, co-curator with Nancy Krasko of INTERWOVEN, Textile Artists and Climate Change, an exhibit of fiber and textile by members of I3C Artist Group and their guests. It's in its final week at the Mosesian Center for the Arts in Watertown. Before we introduce tonight's speaker, I would like to thank several groups that have helped us produce this exhibit. Their websites will be listed in the chat. First, thank you, Gather Fiber Symposium, who's included our exhibit and our events in its programming. Gather is a month-long endeavor that includes over 100 events centered around fiber and textile, in person and online, with exhibits, panels, gatherings, and workshops. Thank you also to the Mosesian Center for the Arts for giving us this beautiful gallery space, and the expertise of their Director of Visual Arts, Boriana Kancheva, and Matt Jetkola, the Director of Creative Services and Design, and installer extraordinaire. It's a lively place with gallery exhibits, art and theater classes for children and adults, and theatrical performances in their 2 theaters. Thanks go to I3C for providing such a richly talented group of artists. We are 30 members strong now and include, in addition to the fiber-based artists in this exhibit, photographers, sculptors, painters, and mixed media artists. Our mission is to inspire awareness and action towards improving the environmental and climate crisis through art. Our next exhibits will be at Midway Artist Studio in May and the Arts Collaborative in Medford in September. For Interwoven, we added pop-up shops to our gallery events for the first time, and they were a great addition to our programming. I'd like to thank our guest clothiers who feature sustainable processes in their work, Stevie Lee and Suzanne Watsman. They were kind enough to join us at both gallery events, giving our visitors a chance to try on and purchase their innovative and eco-friendly clothing. And finally, thanks to those who helped behind the scenes for tonight's event. Nancy Krasko, my wonderful co-curator. It was such a pleasure to work hand in hand with you on this project, Nancy. Today's team, Michaela Morse, our Zoom czar, and Rebecca McGee-Tuck, who suggested our speaker for tonight. And of course, I3C's founder, Adriana G. Pratt, for declaring our mission and finding artists who share it. Rebecca, would you like to introduce Tony?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's my great pleasure to welcome artist, healer, and ecologist Tony Lemos to our Zoom gathering. Tony is a multidisciplinary practitioner whose work sits at the intersection of art, ecology, and herbalism. Her practice, which she beautifully calls Art That Breathes, invites us into a deeper relationship with the natural world through collaborative, process-based approaches rooted in respect and symbiotic relationships. From eco-printing and alternative photography to foraging, medicine making, and community gatherings, Tony's work challenges us to slow down, to listen, and to remember our innate connection to Gaia. Her materials are of the earth, and her art is a living dialogue with the plant world. Tony draws inspiration from visionary women artists working on the edge of mysticism and surrealism, whose work helped shape symbolic and spiritual art in the early 20th century. As an immigrant and a proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community living in rural Massachusetts, her perspective is deeply rooted and expansive. Please join me in welcoming Tony Lemos as she shares more about her work, process, and vision tonight. And please, you put your questions in the chat, and at the end, the questions will be given to Tony after her speech.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thanks, Martha, Michaela, and everyone else. I really appreciate being here, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you all. The way this evening's going to go, the next 45 minutes, I'm going to talk first for about 15 minutes or so. Then there'll be a break while I introduce some of my work in a slideshow. And then we'll conclude with a little conclusion and then a little bit more talking. And then I would love to answer people's questions. So thanks again for having me. And thanks to everyone else for joining us tonight on this Earth Day, a day rooted in awareness, action, and deep connection to the planet we all share. As Rebecca said, my name is Tony, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist and herbalist whose life and work are grounded in deep, evolving relationships with the natural world. I come from a lineage of women who held their own kind of power. My roots trace back to the Greek island of Eleusis in the northern Aegean. So my roots trace back to the Greek island of Eleusis in the northern Aegean Sea, which is just 8 miles long. It's tucked between the Greek island of Chios and the Turkish coast. Both my parents were born there. Through them, I carry the salt of the Aegean and the winds of resistance, and the stories of women who knew how to endure, create, and lead, whether or not history wrote their names. I like to honor the matriarchs of my family, my 2 grandmothers, Aspasia and Calliope. Both names, which in ancient Greek carry a lot of power. Aspasia, my mother's mother, historically the Medic woman of Athens. That is a woman who's not a citizen, but not enslaved, something in between. An intelligent woman who ran a school and influential, always navigating her place in society and culture. And that's a historical figure who I really resonate with. And then on the other side, my grandmother Calliope was in mythology the chief of all muses, said to inspire epic poetry, memory, and voice. These are the women I carry into my practice. On a side note, both of these women had a seat at Judy Chicago's dinner party, which is a piece of art that I discovered in my late teens that really set me on the path that I'm on today. My sun sign is in Virgo, my moon is in Aquarius, and I rise in Scorpio. So perhaps it's no surprise that I'm drawn both to earth and revolution, order and intensity, all elements that you'll see in my work. And today, on this Earth Day, I want to explore with you how myth, memory, land, and legacy converge in the work I create. Because to care for the earth, I believe, is also to remember where and who we come from. I often say that I'm a product of 1970, not just because that was the year I was born, but because it's the same year that marked the first Earth Day, a moment when 20 million voices across the US rose together to say something needs to change. The seeds of that movement were sown by Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and nurtured by generations of thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Now, 55 years later, we come together again in another moment, knowing the urgency of something needing to change. I remember saving my pocket money as a young child, or young teen, I should say, to join Friends of the Earth, which at the time was still a scrappy grassroots group. I grew up in London, by the way, so some of these references might be London references. But so I saved my pocket money to join Friends of the Earth when it was still a scrappy grassroots organization. I attended events led by Anita Roderick, who was the founder of Body Shop, at a time when Body Shop, long before it was a staple on every street corner and a sellout on some level. And I remember showing up at Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park for environmental rallies as soon as I was old enough to find my way there. So my coming up and coming of age seems really steep in the environmental movement. But perhaps the two most shaping events for me began, well, the first one began with a school project in what would have been probably American sixth grade, when we studied the Green Revolution. At the time, the focus was on its supposed benefits, how agricultural advancements were promising to solve global hunger, and how it was a positive thing. As my environmental awareness deepened, I began to see a very different picture and came to understand the ethical, colonialist, and social implications of the Green Revolution, and realized that it was far from the heroic narrative I had been taught. And I remember that moment so deeply, realizing that what I was learning wasn't the same truth as what everyone was experiencing. And it was around that time I encountered the work of Vandana Shiva and was hungry for all her writings, her speakings. I got to see her as a young person speaking at Hyde Park, and hearing she gave language and context to the unease I had been feeling. And her voice really reframed my understanding of the environmental ecological movement. Looking back now, it was also at that time that I came to realize the importance of intersectionality, how all these movements intersect, although it was many years before I learned that word for it. And then in 1991, I was a brand new herbalist, freshly graduated from Rayworth College of Natural Medicine, and in the US for the first time attending the International Herb Symposium, eager and green in every sense of the word. It was there I heard the words that crystallized something really deep within me, spoken by fellow herbalist David Hoffman. I don't remember the title of the class, but I remember writing down his words verbatim. Herbalism is ecology in practice. It landed deep and ready to sprout. But until that moment, I hadn't fully grasped that I had chosen a path that was not just aligned with ecology, but it was embedded in it. To be an herbalist is to work with the earth, not against it. To listen, to observe, to be in relationship of reciprocity, to understand that health is not separate from habitat, that the wellness of our bodies is bound to the wellness of soil, planet, and pollinator. As Andy Goldsworthy said, we often forget that we are nature. Nature is not something separate from us. So when we say we've lost our connection to nature, we've lost our connection to ourselves. For 25 years, I taught herbalism. I taught herbal apprenticeships. Over the course of those 25 years, I trained 400 herbal apprentices. They would come for a 1-year program where we would learn about healing, growing the plants, making the medicine, treating the community. And a few years ago, I realized that something within that pattern wasn't working for me. Something felt like, well, it was based on what I was realizing, that a lot of disease and a lot of unrest and kind of despair came from the fracture between people being disconnected to the land and people being disconnected from the planet. So I started seeking alternative ways to help people heal that fracture. And as I was seeking and developing alternative ways, I started spending more time in meditation and creative practice. As an artist, I work with the alchemical processes of the green world, eco-printing, alternative photographic methods, such as cyanotype, anthotype, chlorophyll prints, salt prints. I forage a lot, and medicine making. It all feels part of my art practice. When working with plants, one is in concert with another living being. I see my work as a collaboration with nature. My materials are often of the earth, and I want to inspire the viewer a sense of wonder and remembering what it feels like to be in relationship and connected to the earth. To live as an ecological artist is a way of being in the world, a way of perceiving, a practice of paying attention, refining our sensitivity to the subtle, noticing what feelings arise and where they lead. Ritual for me is a form of conversation, a call and response with the natural world, both seen and unseen. Ritual is about cultivating intimacy with land, spirit, and soul. We all have the capacity, if we choose to listen, to trust our intuitive knowing. Ritual shifts us from rational into present or presence. My work is a collective effort. The ground, the bulbs, the soil, the sun, the blooms, the bees, the rain, the clouds, me, my clippers, my basket, wandering through a garden or wild lands, letting my senses guide me. The rainwater, a pot on the fire, some alum powder, some gum arabic, perhaps a clove, a drop of thyme oil, and all the hands together that makes the materials, the glass, the paper. Art making is how I feel connected to the earth. My work often takes the form of social engagement through workshops, gatherings, dinners, and writing. Like many artists, I hope my work brings about a little change, that it draws people in, helps them think, feel, and remember. Because not that long ago, we all had connections to the earth, to the gardens, to the plants. When the world gets too much, I walk. I walk until I'm inspired. In the woods, I'm drawn to micro worlds, moss, lichen, fungi. In cities, I notice plants pushing up through the concrete, and I find beauty in the unexpected. These days, my process includes relief printing and intaglio printmaking, monotype, contact printing with botanicals. I work with earth-based materials, blending traditions and models, and experimenting as I go. Making art brings the stillness and healing of nature into my daily life, allowing me to slow down, connect, and remember. I want to awaken in the viewer a sense of wonder, a memory of what it feels like to be in good relationship with Gaia, with the land, and with self. I want to honor a few of my teachers, women whose work has shaped my path, nourished my practice, and reminded me again and again that healing, art, and activism are all acts of love and prayer to the earth. My first teacher who I was able to study with in India, who I already mentioned, was Dr. Vandana Shiva. I was lucky enough to go and spend some time on her farm in India back in 2003. And through her, studied seeds, food activism and had the experience of working in a seed bank for the first time and really falling in love with the potential, the power of a seed. My second teacher, Susan Weed, herbalist, author, and founder of the Wise Woman tradition, a lineage that centers around nourishment, intuition, and cyclical wisdom. Her teaching reminds us all that Earth doesn't need fixing. It needs remembering that healing is not linear, but a spiral. And finally, my third teacher, Rocio Alarcon, who is an Ecuadorian ethnobotanist and curandera who shares ancestral wisdom. From her, I learned how to pray and how to manage forces, the power of ritual in everything we do. These women taught me to listen, not just with my ears, but with my hands, my heart, and my whole being. In recent years, my work has evolved into a practice I call art that breathes. Because plants are alive. And whenever you collaborate with a plant to make art, you're collaborating with a living being. So you are not fully in charge of the end result. Every single plant is different. Every plant is energetically different. Every plant has different constituents. Every plant has a different amount of pigment. So while you have an idea, you're working together and the end result is always a little bit of a surprise. Whereas when you're working with, say, acrylic paint, it's plastic, it's dead. Like you are fully in charge. When you work with plants, it's always a collaboration with another living being. It's a process-based methodology that deepens our connection to the healing plants through collaborative art. It's perpetually in progress, a living practice, a reciprocal relationship. Rooted in the wise woman tradition of herbalism, art that breathes nourishes the whole being. It honors cycles, embraces transformation, and welcomes the mess. It is embodied, intuitive, and relational. It begins with a walk. For the first 20 minutes or so are for landing, are for letting go. Then comes the noticing. Who's blooming? Who's returned? What's responded to climate? It's not about collecting materials. It's about sensorizing, connecting, categorizing, noticing. Art that breathes is low impact and reciprocal. Inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer's Honorable Harvest, or as we say in herbalism, ethical wildcrafting. It's process-based, not product-oriented, a practice of inquiry, not a quest for perfection. It's ephemeral and sensory, like the bloodroot or Tibetan sand mandala. It's all about being in the moment and the process. It's haptic and intuitive. We work through our hands, through play, and through relationship. Mindful and seasonal, working with what is, not what we wish would last forever. It draws from the Japanese wabi-sabi, also the slow movement, sensory herbalism, and the commons movement. It champions accessibility, community, local knowledge, and deep time. It encourages you to become a biophiliac and a topophiliac, someone that falls in love with place and land. Weeds like dandelion, nettle, and yarrow are our allies. There are 5,000 weed seeds in every square foot of healthy soil. Nature's first aid kit, and they are the foundation of my art. So now I'm going to share my screen with you all and show you some examples of my Art That Breathes work. Whoops, that's not number one. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, here we go. So this is a seaweed cyanotype that I have. The background paper is paper made out of 3 different types of seaweed. And then I embedded seaweed into it and obviously use the same pieces of seaweed to make the cyanotype. And I put that in first to honor Rebecca's love of ocean. So here we have some eco prints. The big one and the little one on the bottom are dahlias. So eco prints of dahlia flowers. And this was an eco print taken from an elderly neighbor's garden. She was moving into a assisted living place and was wanting to say goodbye to her garden. So I went out and made an eco print. I actually made 4 throughout her final season there. And this was the late summer eco print. So she could take the 3 or 4 prints with her and remember the energy of her garden always. And this print was made about 5 years ago. And the original is still super bright. So I know we always talk about eco prints not, being a little fading in daylight. I have found that some of them, some color pigment lasts really well. This is just a wall of eco prints from a show I did a couple of years ago. There were a total of 72 of them. This was the beginning of my study of dandelion last summer. So this piece is a weaving that includes dandelion stems, a cyanotype of dandelion, eco prints of dandelion. The flag book up in the corner was all dandelion blossom eco prints. And this book, the binding was woven with dandelion stems. I spent 2 months last year just falling in love all over again with dandelion and just challenging myself to make as many pieces of art with dandelion, as I was also drinking the tea regularly and eating, making pesto with dandelion greens. I gave myself last month a whole month of like dandelion immersion. And as an herbalist who's worked with dandelion for 30 years, I have to say, making art with dandelion, like, deepened that relationship. So, like, because it was a relationship, it was a collaboration as opposed to just taking the medicine. Here we have my all-time favorite plant, bloodroot, which I'm really excited about. It's bloodroot season right now. And then a little pigment I made from daffodil. And that yellow strip was paper dyed with dandelion. I keep saying dandelion, daffodil pigment. A spider bound book, which I made. And what you're seeing here is eco prints of buttercups. So lots of little buttercups. I love working with elements, and this flag book is like the sky, the root, and again, the dandelion flower in the middle. This book I just finished a few days ago for a show at the studio I work at, and it was inspired by Mary Oliver's poem, Among the Trees. And it's a embellished tunnel book. And the bark, which is a photopolymer print, is bark of a cedar tree from Kew Gardens I visited with a couple of years back. I love moss and lichen, and the print on the left is a photopolymer print of moss. And then the other one is just an in-process piece that I'm presently working with making into a print. Right now, what you see is all photographs. Some cyanotype work. The window installation was for a show, Mind, Memory, Mycelium, I curated a few years ago. And that was a large window and had over 1,000 hanging double-sided cyanotypes of my ancestors and memories of childhood and plants. It was a fun project. That's a recent photopolymer print that really relates to Earth Day. So I've been thinking a lot about the fragmented Earth, the mixed up Earth. And these are all earthy prints that have been cut up and kind of jumbled up. And that's back to Andy Goldsworthy's quote. And I'm back. So Frank Lloyd Wright believed that plants and forests were high art. I love that. I 100% agree that in just looking at a forest, you're looking at art. He told his students, study nature, love nature, stay close to nature. It will never fail you. I used to tell my students on day one of my year-long apprenticeship, to be an herbalist, you have to be an ecologist first. You can't be an herbalist if you don't love water, love air, love the plants, love the fire, and do everything you possibly can to protect the environment. And perhaps we can say, to be an artist, to be a healer, to be alive on this planet, you have to be an ecologist first. Plants are our companions, breathing with us, living beside us, inspiring us to become more human. They inhale what we exhale and exhale what we need to live, reminding us that reciprocity is the root of all life. Rooted in place, yet endlessly adaptive, they show us how to be in right relationship with our surroundings, listening deeply, responding with care, and growing in harmony with the rhythms of the earth. Their quiet presence invites us to slow down, pay attention, and remember what it means to belong. They teach us not only how to survive, but how to thrive in connection with the land, with each other, and with the parts of ourselves that are wild, intuitive, and whole. Over time, my path as an herbalist and artist have merged, both grounded in observation, ritual, and relationship. When I think of tending a field of prunella, making a tincture, or harvesting buttercups from eco-prints, I'm working with what's already there, coaxing out what wants to be seen and what longs to be remembered. I now see my art as another form of ecology in practice, a kind of visual herbalism, a gathering of stories, elements, ancestral echoes. The women in my bloodline, the plants that have whispered their names through centuries, the fragments of myth carried across oceans and generations, they all live in what I make. On Earth Day, we're often asked to look and reflect. What kind of world are we creating? What are we leaving behind? But Earth Day is also an invitation to look back, to remember who we came from, what we're made of, what ways of knowing might have been forgotten? What can we still reclaim? I come from the island of Inusis, a small island that knows the tides. From grandmothers and medic women, from muses, from memory, from a year that has given us both protest and possibility. Today, I invite you to do the same, to see your creativity, your healing, your resistance as earthwork. Because in the end, art isn't separate from the soil. It's a kind of rooting, a way to remember, a way to return. So on this Earth Day, I offer art that breathes, not only as a practice, but as a way to connect, a way to listen, a way to heal, a way to love where you are, a way to love who you are, and a way to re-fall in love with the earth. Thank you. That's all I have for you. I'll take questions.
Well, I was really beautiful thoughts, and really, I really related to when you talked about collaborating with nature instead of trying to control what the product is, but finding what needs to be coaxed, what needs to be seen, what wants to be seen. Really lovely. Rebecca asked a question in the chat. In your work, do you invite people to reconnect with the natural world through ritual experiences involving plants or otherwise?
Yes, I do. I love to host. We do. My Rocio, my Ecuadorian teacher, has taught us a practice of creating living landscapes with seeds and nature outside. And through those living landscapes, we create rituals for people to connect. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it seemed like everything you were saying just is set up to be that way. And I know that you have your surrealist dinners, so I know that there's
And
a
the
sort of
dinners too, yes.
performative aspect to your work.
What are
Yeah.
the dinners? What are the dinners?
Oh, thank you for asking. So every Tuesday, I had one right before I hopped on the Zoom. Every Tuesday since the day after the inauguration, I committed to hosting a surrealist dinner. I invite two guests from my community who don't know each other, and we have dinner, and it's a little performative, but I serve up conversation of connection, hope, activism. We share resources, record. It's an oral history of the time. Women gathering around a table and having a conversation. And, everyone, I know none of you are local particularly, but everyone's invited, Tuesday nights until it's no longer needed.
Huh. That's a great. What are some of the rituals? Could you describe some of the rituals involving plants that you do as Rebecca asked about?
Yeah, so a lot of the rituals are like creating, I guess a mandala would be another word. We call it living altars outside and with seeds. I work with seeds a lot because a seed is potential. A seed is all of life. A seed is a beginning. A seed is the end. So we do a lot of rituals with different seeds and planting the seed around seeds and creating art with seeds, sometimes with small groups of people, sometimes with bigger groups of people. And, sometimes it's more literal working with seeds, and other times it's just more intellectually planting those seeds. I connect people. I encourage people to choose herbal allies, like an herbal buddy that you work with for entire season, and you treat that plant. You dream with that plant. You make art with that plant. You sleep with that plant, and you really kind of learn to communicate. Having a close friend that's not a human friend. Another thing, I encourage people to choose one body of water near them and just become advocate for that one body of water, or a one tree that's the tree, that they're gonna, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. That's great. Anna, did you have a question? You had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much, Tony. That was wonderful. So
You're
I'm
welcome.
I'm one of the artists in I3C, and yeah, I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about the land that you're working on, whether you have a garden, the sort of land that you're taking these wonderful walks through. I'd just love to have a better sense for sort of where you're situated.
Thank you. I live in Western Mass in ruralness. I have a garden. Well, I had, so this year I'm starting a new garden because I recently moved, but I had a garden for the herb school for 25 years where we grew medicinal plants. Everything was about medicinal plants. I'm a member of a CSA, so I don't grow my own food. I go to the CSA because they do it way better than I do. But I grow medicinals. I make medicine. But since I moved a year and a half ago, I decided that I want to grow medicinal plants anymore. I want to grow flowers. So I'm totally like changing. I'm having a flower garden this year. But I do a lot of wildcrafting. I live in the country that, like, I can walk out my front door and take many different hikes and be in the woods. And, so I'm lucky in that respect that, but I also spend, a lot of time in New York City with my daughter. And I find the same level of walking and being inspired by nature, in the city. I walk in Central Park a lot, I'm as much a city person as I am a country person. So did that answer your question? I see it in the chat. Or
No,
what
thank
ways?
you. That was
Oh,
wonderful.
that's a different question about ways of communicating with plants.
Here's Annabelle's question. In your experience, what are the ways that plants communicate with us, either through color, texture, sensing? Asking, since sometimes we ignore the signals from the environment and the plants. Thank you.
Great question. I think that we could all easily learn the language of plants. All you have to do is listen. I know, what I teach my apprenticeship in the beginning, and one of the first lessons is before you harvest the plant, you have to ask permission. And people are like, well, how do I do that? How do I talk to plant? Just talk to the plant, you'll know. And it's just being quiet enough to listen. It's actually, you listen to the plants. You don't expect them to, the more you listen. I think you use the word sensing in the question. It's a sensorizing, plants, it's about remembering the language of the plants. We all know the language of nature. We just have to be quiet enough and open enough to pick up the cues, to listen to the answers. Is that good enough, Annabelle? Great. Other questions?
Hi, Tony. I have a question
Hi,
for you.
Michelle. Yeah.
Hi.
How are
I'm really
you?
proud. Good. I'm proud to call Tony, Becky, and Beth, my colleagues in the Clark University MFA program. But I kind of know Tony from hanging out, but I've never seen her actually present. That was super interesting and fabulous. And I'm really interested in my thesis on really approaching climate change and painting. So this is a really interesting presentation for me. But I'm curious about one of the things that this is more a statement than a question, I guess, but climate change seems so overwhelming when you think about it. And one of the things that I really like that you're doing is just through the act of caring and doing what you're doing, you're making a difference. And it seems so important right now when it's easy to get overwhelmed by what we're facing. to have these acts that maybe are more intimate and personal and smaller, and I don't mean smaller, but I mean, just more intimate, that you could
I
share with
hear you.
other people. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, the people who come to you who are doing some of the printing with plants and the use of plant materials, are you are they coming in with an agenda and they leave with a different perspective, or how does that, what do you see?
Sometimes, I mean,
Observation.
definitely. I mean, that I definitely feel that people come in because sometimes they see my art and they want to make they want to make a beautiful piece of art that they can hang on the wall. And, and we go through a whole process. We talk about that it's not about the end result, it's about the connection. And the deeper the connection, the more beautiful the art is going to be at the end.
Mhm.
Whether or not, like, it's that linear. But if you feel connected, you are going to love what you make. And for me, it's all about helping people fall in love with plants, fall in love with the water, fall in love with the elements, fall in love with the planet. Because if people, I mean, the results are so amazing when people are in love with the earth. One, they want to protect it. And two, their anxiety, their depression, their health gets better. And so I feel like, yes, it is. In some ways, I feel like it's a cop out. It's an easy, like, it's easier than being out there, for fighting for policy change. Like, but I found what I am good at. Like, I am not good at writing new laws and policy change, and that level of it's not what I'm good at. I'm good at relating to people, helping people, connect people with plants. And
Yeah, and
I
there's a
want to
big,
do what we're all good at different things, and
yeah.
I'm a relational person.
There's a big debate in the art community about the sublime and wanting to have that climate, communicating that in a sublime, beautiful way versus advocacy and activism. And I feel
Yeah.
like you're someplace beautifully in the middle of all that, where it's not about either of those. It's about engagement and bringing people in. So congrats to you for the work that you're doing. It's super impressive.
I think we all know where our strengths are, and if we could all feel like, we're doing our part, what more can we ask for? Thank you, Michelle.
Excellent. There's another question in the chat, Tony. Your beautiful slideshow shows your artworks are visually dense in their depiction of plant matter in many forms. You also mentioned writing as a part of your work. What relationship does your writing and your visual art practice have? This is from Michaela.
Thank you, Michaela. I write a Substack, and it's really, for me, about working through that intersection of art and herbalism. I interview people. It's very, it's not for everyone. I mean, it's kind of a little rambly sometimes, but it helps me work through, like, what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and also introduce other people. Like, I interview other artists that are at that intersection of art and herbalism. And when I discover lost, women that people don't know about historically, who are at that intersection, I write about them. So it's really, like, I'm such a proponent of women's voices and women's history not being lost, that, I believe in oral history and, keeping people's stories alive. So that's, why I have a writing practice and a visual art practice. I'm just rereading the question.
That really resonates. Thank you. I really appreciate
you.
the sentiment of writing to the point of connection, understanding, engagement, processing the information.
Rebecca, what do you mean by a futurist? I don't really know what that means.
A futurist being somebody who is organizing, like preparing for what's ahead. Like your artwork is kind of like you're preparing, like you're preparing people to have an engagement with plants, and because it's necessary for our future, especially with the climate.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Mhm.
futurist. Okay. I don't know. In my head, I was thinking of prepper. Oh,
Oh, no,
I don't
no,
know.
no, futurist
No,
as
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of
Yes.
artists, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, if- I'd like to ask some technical questions. There are a few, how do you reconcile using techniques that are less sustainable than others? Do you grapple with that?
Um, Sometimes. Yes. And I have, it's a challenging question because I, um, I've spent a lot of time trying like to be perfect. I mean, don't we all, like you want to be the perfect consumer, the perfect environmentalist, the perfect, um, just do the right thing. And I, and this is kind of a more recent, and this might change tomorrow. I've just come to accept that sometimes, I can be completely natural and walk very gently on the planet. And yet sometimes I want to go into the dark room and make a photopolymer print because it's beautiful. And that print is going to speak to people and help people connect with nature and make beauty. And, my biggest challenge right now, Martha, is that there's a part of me that's saying, I want to make all my own paper. I want to stop buying paper. I want to make all my paper for my art. And I know that that's impossible for me. But that's the grapple that's going on in my head right now. Like, I got to stop buying paper. Like, I use too much paper in my practice. But if I were to make all my own paper, that's all I would ever do. I would, so it's the voices, the internal battle.
I think a lot of artists in this community with sustainable practices are striving towards sustainability. And I think that's what we can ask of them, and just to be aware of, what processes do what, and balance out, as you said, the message with with the footprint.
Yeah. And also going from sustainable to regenerative practice, really like, can we give back? Once we're sustainable, what can we return?
I like that additional thought. Yes.
But it's like I am far from perfect. And but it is. I think it's important that we keep checking in with ourselves and not beat ourselves up, but also, just constantly be aware of what's going on and what our footprint and how can we do better. I was recently being interviewed for this podcast and I started talking about the 10%. Like, this is my latest like soapbox. You know how everyone here, I'm assuming we're all environmentalists or ecologists, working really hard to have sustainable regenerative practices. And probably doing way more than so many people. But what if, we just gave ourselves a little grace and just try to do 10% better? And then like next month, checked in again and try to do 10% better. And then just kept kind of working with a 10% better and checking in, and encouraged others who might not be as aware to do 10% better, because these little increments would make such a huge difference and be so much better for our self-care, as opposed to trying to do it all at once.
Well said. We're hitting our 8:30 mark. I just want to ask if anybody has any further questions or something they want to add to our conversation before we sign off.
I want to say thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. I appreciate that. Thank you for coming and spending your Earth Day night. I love meeting you all. I'm sorry I couldn't see your show. But next time, I would love to come down and check it out. I think you said May and September.
Mhm. And yes, this recording will be available on the I3C website, our YouTube channel. Coming soon.
Wonderful. Thanks for a great evening. Thank you, Tony. We all feel a little
Thanks,
closer,
Tony.
I think, after
Thank
listening,
you.
know where to head next. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks
great
very
evening.
much.
Great.
Everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. That was awesome.